Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the fifth session of our Salesforce Efficiency webinar series, presented by Sales Pro Central and B2B Marketing Zone and sponsored by Conga. I'm Eve Lyonsberg, the site manager of Sales Pro Central, and I'm excited to bring you 6 fresh voices in this space who are going to bring you hard-earned insight about digital transformation, optimization, and automation in Salesforce. I'm really looking forward to interviewing and talking with each participant in what I'm sure will prove to be interesting and amusing conversations. And don't worry, they're being recorded in case you have to miss any. So before we go any further, I want to thank Conga for sponsoring the webinar series and for helping us to make this happen. If you haven't heard of Conga, they're a fantastic company that helps you increase the return on your Salesforce CRM investment through automation of data, document generation, contract lifecycle management, and reporting solutions. Thanks again, Conga. So you should feel free to ask questions during today's session. You can do so by submitting them into the question panel on the right side of your screen. We'll try and answer them throughout the presentation and at the end of the presentation during the Q&A section. I'm joined today by my colleague Nick, and he will be happy to answer any questions that you may have, so go ahead and say hello in the questions box to let him know you're listening. Lastly, if you have any audio issues during today's presentation, you may wish to choose to dial in by phone. You can do so by selecting the More button in the upper right portion of your screen and then selecting the Switch to Phone option. So today I'm talking with Gary Galvin, a consultant and sales leader who specializes in sales leadership, optimizing your CRM, and turning prospects into loyal clients. His work as president and CEO of Galvin Technologies has provided him with over a decade of Salesforce experience, which he's excited to share with all of you. He's also been wonderful to work with, so I'm really looking forward to talking with him today. So Gary, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
All right, Eve. Hey, thank you so much. It's good to be here, and I really appreciate it. I was excited to do this presentation with you, so thank you very much. I'm just going to do so before we dive into how we're going to build a successful and results-driven sales culture. I thought I would do just a quick plug about who we are. So we're a Salesforce consulting partner, and essentially what we do is we help companies with their sales processes. We help companies with their business processes, all working on the Salesforce platform. You can visit us at www.galvintech.com, or we'd love it if you could follow us on Twitter as well. So with our presentation for today, what I talk on this topic a lot, and as a Salesforce consulting partner, one of the questions we get all the time from companies, it's typically companies who have Salesforce already, and they'll call us and they'll say, people aren't using Salesforce. I can't get my sales team to use Salesforce, or one of my favorites one is Salesforce isn't working, which that doesn't happen. Salesforce just doesn't not work. But what that typically means is Salesforce isn't exactly set up or configured properly for our sales team. So, what we have a tendency to do is we kind of bucket these requests into what we call, oh, okay, you just need to use Salesforce better. And they typically agree, like, yes, we just need to use Salesforce better. Well, the thing is, it's not Salesforce, it's not the CRM. What we really have to do here is we really have to change the culture, and we have to really understand what metrics we're going to be driving towards so that we can ultimately use Salesforce better and use Salesforce for what it's set up to do. So let me first kind of set the landscape here. What we've learned over the years, and through our research and also just talking to people, is that today's sales managers were salespeople in the years, what seems to be 1992 to 1995. So at that time frame, a lot of people were coming out of college and they were going right into sales, and these were the salespeople that are today's sales managers. Well, that was also at an era where the sales culture was changing. A lot of people or a lot of companies were transitioning and they were moving out of the office into their home office. So our sales teams became very remote. And it created some challenges for the sales managers, because now the sales managers who are very used to managing salespeople within their office, very used to doing ride-alongs, very used to being right there with them, knowing every deal and what's going on, didn't exactly have that. So the culture began to change, and sales managers weren't really sure at that time how to manage a remote workforce efficiently. So what these sales managers end up doing is they ended up simply managing their sales team with the typical, tell me what you did last week. And the salespeople would tell them what they did last week, and then they would move on and get their week started. Well, now we fast forward to today. Those salespeople are now sales managers. And now we're bringing technology to the table. We're bringing all these techniques, we're bringing all these processes, we're bringing all these metrics to the table, and salespeople or sales managers typically aren't trained as well to lead their sales team with the right types of strategy. So when we talk with sales, when we talk with sales organizations, and when a sales manager would say, "Hey, can you please come in and help our sales team?" After some probing questions, we always start with the question of, sure, we could help you. What are your salespeople held accountable to? And it's Eve, it's interesting how many blank stares that I get with this. So, I'll ask them, what are your salespeople held accountable to? And they're looking at me like I just asked them to split the atom, or I asked them some very complicated question. And they hem and they haw and they kind of kick around a little bit, and they're not really sure. And then what I typically get is they're held accountable to numbers, or they're held accountable to revenue, and that's it. Well, if I was held accountable to just revenue and I had a year to hit that number, I mean, that's a really hard thing to measure on a daily basis. So I always begin to kind of scratch my head as it relates to, why are we not holding salespeople accountable to the same level that we're holding our accounting team, how we're holding our accounting team accountable, or how we're holding our operations team accountable? I mean, imagine if we allowed our accounting team to just not keep the general ledger as accurate. They would never use the accounting system. Or imagine if we said to our operations team, hey, you just got to get the products out the door. You just have to get the service delivered at some point. Well, if we're not holding people accountable, they're not going to want to use the systems that we gave them, and things just get out of control. So we always start with, what are you held accountable to? And then it's the sales manager who originally calls us and then realizes, look, the reason why Salesforce isn't being used very well is because it has to start with you, the sales manager. You aren't requiring people to use Salesforce. Because you don't know what to hold them accountable to. So in order for us to build a successful and results-driven sales culture, it has to start with the sales manager. The sales manager has to know exactly what he wants his people to be held accountable to, and he has to hold them accountable to data that's inside of Salesforce. So what we do is we tell our clients, look, our first goal is we want to be able to run the Monday morning sales meeting 100% out of Salesforce. Now, Eve, not everybody does their sales meeting on Monday morning. A lot of people do them on Friday. A lot of people do them every other week. But typically what we hear, and I'll just make it general for this presentation, typically what we hear is that most sales teams get together on Monday mornings. And what they do is they typically go over, what did you do last week? And what they'll typically get is the Monday morning, all the salespeople will come in and they'll either write up an email of what they did last week, who they met, what opportunities they're working on, who they had coffee with, Or, you know, even more of the advanced ones is they might have their own Excel spreadsheet, and they have to send their Excel spreadsheet into their sales manager before 9 a.m. on Monday. Well, then what the sales manager does in those Monday morning meetings is he goes over all those emails and all those spreadsheets, and it's a waste of time. It's not accurate. And really what the salespeople are doing is they're just trying to get out of the way. They know that they have to do the meeting, and they're just giving the sales manager what he wants to hear. So our first goal is to change the culture and say, okay, in order for us to have a results-driven culture, we have to commit ourselves to driving our Monday morning sales meetings 100% out of Salesforce. Okay. Well, that sounds easy, but next what we see a lot is sales managers don't know what to measure. Okay, so I asked them earlier, what are you held accountable to? And they look at me with a blank stare and they say, well, ultimately to revenue. And that's great. I mean, that's a great place to start. I believe strongly that you have to measure revenue. But there's a lot more to revenue, right? So we always start with 3 metrics. We say, look, if you want to use Salesforce better, you have to measure your quota, you have to have pipeline metrics, and you have to have activity metrics. Can we commit on those 3 things that we want to be able to monitor and measure within Salesforce? So how do we do that? We start with quota. Okay, so quota is the easiest thing. Quota, or what a lot of companies will say, is budget, right? So how much revenue do you have to close for the year? And
Gary?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just noticed someone wrote in and said that your audio is fading in and out a bit. Could you check your mic location for me?
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that.
No, that's totally fine. Just want to make sure everyone can hear you.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. If that happens again, please let me know.
All right, sure thing. Please continue.
Okay, sure. So what we want to do is we want to start with quota. So in this example, I'm going to do easy math, and I'm going to say, let's say that as a salesperson, as an individual salesperson, not as a sales organization, but as a salesperson, I'm held accountable to bringing in $1.2 million in annual revenue. Okay, so the year starts and I have to bring in $1.2 million. So how do I measure against that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a graph, right? And on the bottom left is going to be 0. And on the top left is going to be my goal of $1.2 million. Along the bottom, I'm going to have our months from January to December. And then I'm going to have my target graph, right? So I'm going to say, all right, my target is $1.2 million. And if I were to graph that over a year, that means that it would be about $100,000 I would have to target every single month in order to bring in $1.2 million. But we all know that's not how the reality is. A salesperson doesn't close exactly on the dime $100,000 in this example. What's going to happen is, you know, you might, in January, you might close, let's say, 87,000. In February, you might close 93,000. So as you can see, we're still under our target because we haven't had a month yet where we've closed over 100,000. Then in March, we have a pretty good month. We close, maybe it's 110,000. So now we're ahead of our goal. Maybe in, let's say March, maybe in April, maybe now we had another great month. We closed 150,000. Now what's happening is we're measuring ourselves against our target, right? Well, how do we do this in Salesforce? Well, it's simple. We have to make sure that we're measuring, or that every opportunity that is measured by this report enters a stage in the opportunity record called closed won, right? So there's a lot of companies who we work with who don't even recognize and don't even update the opportunities that they've won. Well, that's a great place to start. Let's start closing and winning all of the opportunities that we've closed and won. So every time, so even if I close, let's say it's in the middle of May and I close let's say a $12,000 opportunity, I'm marking that opportunity as closed won because that's going to add to my quota that I'm trying to target for of 100,000, because now I'm getting measured against my target, right? So at any point, so maybe in May, I might close 100,000, maybe in June, I start to hit a summer slump, I close 70,000, maybe July, I close 70,000, August, I go up a little bit, maybe I close 110, kind of flatline a little bit at 90. Now I'm starting to hit big Q4 numbers, right? So as now I'm, maybe I'm at 120,000, maybe I'm at 130,000, and then I have a great December of 150, and that's how my actual is going to look for the year. So maybe at the end of the year, I actually closed 1.3 million, and my target was 1.2. So that's the easy part, right? Marking an opportunity as closed won in Salesforce, it's fun, it's easy, you get to ring the bell, you have victory. That's what we want to go towards. But that's the easiest part of trying to measure ourselves. Just marking an opportunity as closed won is fine, right? Like that's easy. Everybody should be doing that. But in addition to that, how do we have outliers? Like how do we, not outliers, but how do we have other metrics to see how we're doing to the overall picture of our sales? So just saying we closed 110,000 in the month, yes, that's the number we're going towards, but we're trying to lead a sales team. We're trying to manage a sales team. So as an example, you might have your Monday morning meeting on October 8th, right? So maybe on October 8th, you have your Monday morning meeting and you have a speedometer on the left-hand side there, and it shows that you're trying to get to 100,000. Well, you're at 9,500. The sales manager should be telling the salesperson, all right, like how are we going to make up the remainder so that we can get above 100,000? And I'll show you in a couple other slides how we do that. Or over on the right-hand side, how do we start, measuring ourselves against our peers? How do we know that Alan Trammell, Alan Trammell is having a great month, whereas Desmond Howard is, only at 30,000? How do we want to measure ourselves? Do we have that type of culture where we want to measure ourselves to our peers? I think we should, but there's some cultures who we work with who don't like that type of competition. Other things you might want to do, you might want to expand on it. So not only are we looking at revenue, but we might need to see, of that revenue, how much of it is by product, or maybe you provide a service, how much of it is a certain type of service you provide. What we see a lot in reoccurring revenue, especially in the SaaS world, is a lot of MRR, so monthly reoccurring revenue. How much of your business came from new versus current clients, right? So are your salespeople bringing in new logos, or are they getting a lot of their business from the current client base that they have? One that your marketing source or that your marketing team is going to like is by lead source, right? So another report that you could run is how much revenue did we generate by lead source, okay? And this is all data that we could track within Salesforce. This is all data that the salesperson can be plugging into the opportunity record so that we're getting much better numbers. The lead source one is one of my favorites because, a lot of companies put marketing dollars into marketing activities, but they never really know how much revenue is it generating. Well, one example would be, well, let's make sure that every opportunity that closes, we mark where that opportunity came from. Did it come from the website? Did it come from a referral? Did it come from a direct mailer? How did we get that opportunity? So those are just some examples that we can generate from tracking our quota, okay? The quota is, like I said earlier, that's the easy part, right? I showed you in the example earlier how it might be October 5th and a salesperson has only closed 9,500 for the month. Well, a sales manager has one of two things to say. A sales manager can say, go get them and I'm going to cheer you on so that you get, $90,000 more in revenue. Or a sales manager is going to say, hey, what's in your pipeline so that we can make sure that you meet or exceed your revenue goal for the month. So what we then want to instill is we want to instill what are the pipeline metrics that we're measuring ourselves against so that we could hit our revenue numbers. So I always start with, whenever I do this presentation in front of a lot of companies, I'll draw this on a whiteboard and I'll ask a lot of companies, do you know what this is? And I'll admit, a lot of companies don't, and that's okay. But this is a sales funnel. A sales funnel is simply all the opportunities that we are working. We want to be able to have visibility to them, and we want to work them through the funnel, or sometimes, what I like to call it is work it through the pipeline. Okay, so we want to define what are our pipeline stages. Okay, and in this example, I'm going to divide our pipeline into various stages. Maybe at the top of the funnel is prospecting. What are those companies that we're prospecting? After we're prospecting them, there's something there. Now we want to be able to qualify them. So is this an account that we should be doing business with, right? Like I need to qualify this opportunity. Is it real? Yes, it's real. Great. Now this needs analysis. Like we now need to scope this out. We now need to roll up our sleeves and dig a little bit deeper on what the actual opportunity is. Great. Now the client is ready for a proposal or for a quote. Great. Now we're going to deliver a proposal or we're going to deliver a quote. Client has now given us a verbal and he says, send the contract. We send the contract out. Now the contract is in hand. Client signs it and the contract's won. Okay. So we want our opportunities to move through those stages, which means that throughout, as we go into Salesforce, we want to make sure that as we add an opportunity, a new opportunity in Salesforce, right, an opportunity that we're working, we want to be able to add it and give it a stage. So next, what we do is we work with our clients and we start to define the stages, right? Like what are the stages of your sales cycle? And what a lot of companies have is a lot of companies use the stages that come out of the box with Salesforce. Those sometimes align, but we really recommend our clients sitting down and really defining the various stages that their opportunities go through. We've seen some companies who have, 13 stages. We have some companies who have 5 stages, right? Like you really have to define what process and what's the journey that our opportunities go through. But we also have to make sure that we're adding every opportunity in Salesforce. So what we see a lot is we see a lot of situations where companies just don't add the opportunity in Salesforce. So I might have a company might call me and that company might say to us, I'll just use us as an example, hey, we're looking for Salesforce consulting from you guys. Great. Well, now I go out there, I go have a meeting, but I don't add the information inside of Salesforce. Now I have the meeting, I put together a proposal. Now I'm working with people internally at our company and they ask me, well, where's the opportunity? What's it about? How many licenses? What's the scope of work? And they begin asking us these questions. Well, if that information's not in Salesforce, I'm wasting a lot of time. Well, it's typically by this point where I might get some salespeople who will say to me, all right, wait, so you want me to add every single opportunity that I'm working inside of Salesforce? I'll say, yes, I do. So you want me doing that instead of going out there to sell? No, I want you doing that in addition to selling. We want visibility because we're trying to make you close more than $1.2 million. We want you to put more food on your table than you wish you could, right? So we want to be able to know what's going on with your pipeline. Well, so we tell our clients, we want you to instill pipeline metrics. If you have a quota of 1.2 million, well, you should also have a pipeline quota. Well, a pipeline quota is defined by typically by your win ratio. A win ratio is how many opportunities do you win. it's kind of like a batting average. If you have 100 opportunities and you only win 30 of them, then your win ratio is 30%. Well, that also happens to be kind of the standard. It's kind of the textbook standard for win ratios is 30%. So the average salesperson closes 30% of their deals, which then means, okay, if I want to close 1.2 million for the year, then I'm going to put a 3x. I want to make sure that our salespeople have 3 times the amount of opportunities in their pipeline than they're going to close, which means in this example, if I have 1.2 million that I want to close for the year, I might then want to measure 3.6 million. I want to make sure that I have 3.6 million in the pipeline. Well, 3.6 million, we work a lot with companies and then we say, is that a real number? Like, is that a manageable number? Like we have some companies who have very low win ratios, right? Which means like their pipeline has to be 7x. Well, that's a lot of opportunities to manage. So we put different metrics against it. Well, in this example, closing 3.6 million, or I'm sorry, managing 3.6 million of a pipeline is probably a doable number in this example, but it's not a number that my sales manager should really be micromanaging every single week in our Monday morning sales meeting. So instead, what we recommend is we say, let's split the funnel in half and let's only focus in our Monday morning meeting, let's only focus on the bottom of the funnel. So if a sales manager is meeting with me, he might say, Gary, what opportunities are you quoting on? What opportunities are in verbal? And what opportunities have a contract sent? Everything else above the funnel, I'm going to trust that you're going to do just fine there because you're a professional, you know what you're doing. I trust that you're going to manage the top of your funnel. But I want visibility to the bottom of your funnel because we need to close 100,000 per month. Which means if I put a 3x on the top of my funnel or on my whole funnel, and I'm trying to close 100,000 for the month, then I'm going to probably want to have a quota of about 300,000 in the bottom of my funnels, right? So now we have some pipeline metrics that we're trying to go to. You might say 3.6 million for the full funnel, and I want to see 300,000 in the bottom of the funnel every single week. But here's what happens. We're all salespeople. I mean, I should say we're all people. Things happen, things come up. We get busy doing things. We might have a really busy day and then we got to go take our kids to baseball practice or football practice or wherever. And we just, life just gets in the way. But what happens is one of our pipeline begins to not become real. When if we start to have these opportunities where, maybe the close date on this particular red opportunity was supposed to close on September 28th. Well, it's October 11th. If that was supposed to close September 28th, well, that may not even be a real opportunity. Like you did not update the close date. So what I mean by that is within Salesforce on the opportunity object, there's what's called a close date field. We want every opportunity in the pipeline to be in the future. Because what happens is that if that was supposed to close September 28th and it's October 11th, well, we either lost the opportunity, which means get it out of the pipeline. The opportunity's gotten cold, it's gotten delayed, all those things, right? All those things could happen. It's up to us to make sure we're changing that date. So, maybe on October 25th, the client said, hey, look, this isn't going to close on Friday. This isn't going to close on the 28th. We're actually going to push it out about 3 weeks. Well, update the close date. Update the close date so it's pushed out 3 weeks. Because if I'm a manager and I see this opportunity as a close date of 9/28, I'm going to start to question how clean and how real is your pipeline. Okay, so now I begin to have other opportunities kind of become red. Maybe this opportunity where it's in the quote proposal stage. Now, this is one of my pet peeves. It has a past due task. You were supposed to call them and follow up on October 1st. It's now October 12th. And as a sales manager, I'm saying to myself, look, that opportunity isn't real. They haven't even been touched since October, since before October 1st. So it's gone at least 10 days without getting touched. And you're proposing and you're beginning to quote on them. Well, the salesperson might say in return, oh no, I called them, I talked to them, I just forgot to update it. Well, don't do that. Like we are trying to have our pipeline clean because we want to make sure that our salespeople are working good, clean opportunities. So, all right, if you were supposed to call them on the 1st and you left them a voicemail and you didn't update your task, well, shame on you. You should be updating your task to the future. You should always have tasks in the future, never in the past. Or, this always happens. We have an opportunity that's getting stale. Maybe it's been in the verbal stage for 90 days. An opportunity that's in a verbal stage for 90 days probably tells me it got cold or we need to move it out. We could always move opportunities up, right? So you could always move an opportunity up to maybe, they might have a proposal in their hand. They might have given you the verbal, but they said, look, but we can't start for 4 more months. Okay, well then either move that close date out or move it up, right? Or they might say, hey, look, I'm giving you a verbal. We're going to most likely go with you, but the project is on hold for a year. Okay, we'll move it up. We're putting it back up to qualification. We're getting it out of our bottom funnels, right? Because we can't focus on it. We can't have an opportunity sit there that we're getting measured against. So now we have all of these red opportunities that are kind of messing up and kind of making our pipeline dirty. So what happens is maybe when we began the meeting, the Monday morning meeting, we actually, maybe had 300,000 exactly, or maybe we had more than 300,000 in there. But then we begin to see these red opportunities that don't have good data. Well, now we have 175,000. Now we're saying to ourselves, oh no, you only closed 9,500 for the year. For the month. And you have 175,000 of real opportunities in the bottom. Like, we're going to have a really bad month. When we started the meeting, we thought you had 300,000. Now you have 175. And now our full pipeline isn't 3.6, but maybe it's 2.3. Like, oh no, like we have some issues here. Like, we do not have good opportunities to hit our numbers. So it's critical that we keep our pipeline clean and that we drive towards these pipeline metrics, right? So we begin to create these additional reports for our sales managers, right? One example would be every single Monday, I want to see all past due opportunities in the pipeline, right? So I might have 4 salespeople. Drew has 8 past due opportunities. Todd has 3, Joan has 1, and Sarah's the superstar with 0. Okay, hey Drew, you have 8 opportunities that are in the past. Oh, I'm sorry, Gary, those are actually all in the future. I just haven't changed the date. Well, shame on you, Drew. Show up to the meeting with 0 opportunities past due. It's up to you, Drew, to keep those opportunities clean. This is your pipeline. You have to keep it clean. You have to keep it accurate. Okay. Maybe another example would be what opportunities don't have a next step, or the opportunities. I'm sorry, that shouldn't say past due, but they don't have a next step, or they don't have, or the opportunity is in the past, or I'm sorry, the activity is in the past, right? So I might talk to a client. The client says, Gary, great, the proposal looks good. Call me in 2 weeks. Well, if I don't put that task in Salesforce to call him in 2 weeks, I risk forgetting about that opportunity, which means there's money on the table that I risk forgetting about. So we don't want any opportunities in our pipeline without a next step. We want to know always what's going on in the future. So, how many opportunities don't have a next step? Drew has 4, Todd has 0, Joan has 7, and Sarah has 9. Okay, we are risking close to 20 opportunities that we potentially could lose because we forgot to do something about it. And that's painful. I mean, that's That is not stuff that salespeople should be doing. We should be on top of our pipeline. And then the last one, as another report against this, is the stage age. And what a stage age is how long do we as a company allow our opportunities to sit inside of a stage, right? So we might say, if an opportunity sits inside of verbal, it can't sit inside verbal for more than 15 days, or it can't sit inside of needs analysis stage for more than 180 days. So we have to make sure that our opportunities are moving because they might get stale, okay? If an opportunity is in the verbal stage and it's been in there for 70 days, it's probably stale. Something probably happened to that opportunity, okay? So now we have these opportunities in there that aren't really real, they've gotten stale, and it happens to all of us. I do it a lot too. Like, oh, I know he's got the proposal, he said he's going to do work with us, and I know what's going to happen. I just know it is. Well, look, he's been in the quote proposal stage for 100 days. Are you sure it's going to happen? Yeah, he keeps calling me back. Yeah, but he keeps calling you back to tell him to call you in 2 weeks, right? It's time for us to really focus on real opportunities. So, when it comes to the pipeline, you need to know what your win ratio is, right? You know your win ratio because every single opportunity that you're going to be putting into Salesforce, if you win it or if you move it, it goes through the funnel. If you lose it, and remember, we lose, the textbook says we lose 70% of our deals, right? So it's common, it's okay. If we lose it, then we get the opportunity out of our funnel. Then what we're able to do is we're able to set true pipeline metrics. So although the standard is 3x, maybe my win ratio is 40%, maybe it's 60%, and I don't need that big of a funnel. I don't need 3 times the amount in my funnel. Maybe I only need 2 times that amount. And then the other is your numbers matter to others. So you might, what a lot of salespeople say is, I've been selling this way for such a long time. This is the way that I do it. I'm fine with my own Excel sheet and putting it on paper. I get it, right? Like, this is your pipeline. You want to manage it the way that you do. Great. But what you sell, somebody has to deliver on, right? And then you might get frustrated with them as a salesperson because they're not ready for what you're delivering on. Or maybe the inventory's wrong, or maybe the resources aren't aligned. Well, the reason is because you haven't been updating your Salesforce opportunities to allow them to plan accurately, right? So we teach our clients, look, every single week, there always seems to be a sales meeting, and then there always seems to be a meeting between sales and operations, or services team, or the warehouse guy, where they always say, okay, what's coming in? Like, what opportunities might be coming in? Well, we don't want that warehouse guy to be surprised that now, 10 times more opportunities closed than what he thought because our salespeople didn't put in the information. We want these, so the numbers that you put in as a salesperson, they matter to so many others in the company. It matters to the warehouse guy, to the services guy who has to deliver, to the delivery guy who has to get it out the door. All of those things matter. So keep your pipeline clean, okay? And then what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to help manage so that if you only have closed 9,500 for the month, but we see you have 420,000 in the bottom stages, I'm feeling pretty darn good that you're going to exceed your number, okay? So we just a few other things, like your pipeline tells the future. So again, make sure that there's no past due opportunities. Make sure that you report against the number of opportunities without next steps. Stage age, how many opportunities are going stale? What's your win-loss ratio? A few things I also like to measure is what are the new opportunities? So what's been added last week? So if opportunities are going out of our funnel, either sideways or through the bottom, are we also filling it up at the top? Or, what's set to close this week? So, our production guy might be asking, hey, look, I'm running low on inventory. What is going to close this week? Because we've got to do something about the inventory. And then you want to measure your full pipeline and the bottom stages. Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning, we want to measure quota, we want to measure pipeline, and then we want to measure activity. So the quota in our example, there's only two numbers that I'm going to track our team against: 1.2 million for the year and 100,000 per month. For the pipeline, I want to see that our salespeople have more than 3.6 million in clean, accurate, good opportunities. And I want to make sure that they have 300,000 or more in the bottom of their stages. And the last part that we're going to talk about is activity. What's the activity that drives the pipeline that allows us to hit our quota? Okay. So this is something that my dad told me several years ago. He said to me, "Hey Gary, look, activity equals money." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "A salesperson can manage and can control their activities. That's the one thing that they can do. But also a salesperson needs to be doing activities. A salesperson should not be sitting at their desk organizing business cards, or should not be at their desk doing anything other than sales." Okay. And one idea that he gave me is, hey, look, if you don't have a morning meeting and you're just going to be at the office, well, go where the people are, right? Go to the coffee shop where a lot of business people hang out. Just open your laptop and just start to check your emails there. Right? Like, go where the people are, because you're going to bump into people you know, and you're going to bump into people who might need business from you. And I'll tell you, I've been doing that for about 8 years and it works. So anyways, we want to make sure that we track the activity in Salesforce. Okay, why do we want to do this? Okay, well, for one is that we want to track for the results that we want, right? We want to measure we want to measure the activities that we want our salespeople to take to do certain things in the pipeline. For example, we might want to measure our sales or our SDR team to make sure that they're hitting only phone calls, only against new accounts. People will complain. Okay, so now we're going to say to our sales team, look, you're going to have to track your activity in Salesforce. Like, what? Like, you want me to track every call, every email, every meeting? Yes, I do. Now, we're going to set up Salesforce so that it's done the right way and that it's very easy on you. But yes, we want to track all this in Salesforce. Gamify it, right? So, create some competition. Several of our clients will put boards up and they'll put monitors throughout the office showing the type of activity, right? And be consistent. The sales manager has got to be consistent. It's hard to track activity. And the moment that a sales manager lets up on tracking activity, the team will stop. They'll stop. We see it every single time. The team will stop tracking because they don't want to do it. And if the sales manager isn't managing them, they're not going to do it. So let me give you some examples of activity metrics. So one example could easily be, right, like are you doing sales activities? Right, so let's say I have 4 salespeople: Kirk Gibson, Joe Dumars, Glenn Hanlon, and Lomas Brown. I just want to make sure that they're doing activities. This is the easiest, right? This is going into Salesforce, logging a call as completed, right? That's easy. Logging in email as sent. But it's not giving me good information. It's just telling me that my salespeople are busy. Well, maybe I take it one step further. Maybe I say, what type of activities are you doing? We want to make sure you're doing your calls. We want to make sure you're doing meetings. We want to make sure that you're doing demos. And we also want to make sure that you're out in the community and your network. So what are your opportunities by type? Okay, now I'll pause here and say you've got to have a baseline. You've got to have a metric that you're trying to achieve. Otherwise, you don't know if this is good or bad, right? So if your goal is to do 10 demos a week, fine, let's measure against that. If it's to do 38 calls a week, let's measure against that. You've got to set a baseline. Another idea, it's kind of fun. This was actually presented to us by a friend of mine several years ago, but his was points, which is, I don't care what kind of activities you do. I don't care if it's phone calls. I don't care if it's demos. I don't care if it's networking. All that I want to make sure you do is I want to make sure you hit 116 points every single week. Well, how do you get a point? You get a point by logging a call, right? Like you might get 0.5 points for logging a call. You might get 6 points for closing a contract. You might get 5 points for networking. You might get 3 points for doing cold calls. Whatever game you want to set up, that's what you would set up, and then you just track against the points. Okay. Well, the other part of it is, why are we tracking metrics? Why are we tracking activities? Because we want to make sure that our salespeople are doing the things that they're supposed to do. Are they prospecting, right? Are they filling up the top of the funnel? Are they moving opportunities through the funnel? So are they selling, right? Are they working deals? Are they closing? So of those deals that they're working, are they closing them? Are they getting proposals? Are they negotiating? Are they having those challenging conversations to get the deal across the line? Are we farming? Are we nurturing our current account base accurately? What a lot of salespeople do is they just go after the next account, but they have this whole book of business of opportunities and accounts that they could be managing. And then of course issues, right? Like, we're working with people, we're in the people business. There's going to be issues. So as a company, we then want to say, all right, I want you doing activities, but I want to make sure that 20% of your day, of your week is prospecting. I want to make sure 30% of it is selling, 10% of it is closing, 25% of it is account management. And we know there's going to be issues, so we budgeted 15% of your week to just issue management. Mr. Salesperson, those are our targets. Okay, well, what's the reality? Maybe we then take a look at this and says, okay, Joe Dumars, at the end of the week, we're looking at what your metrics are. Look, you spend 30% prospecting, 20% closing, you spent 30% on issues, only 25% selling, and 5% account management. What's going on? And after we see this week after week after week, we might begin to say, wow, you're dealing with a lot of issues. We might need a client success manager, or we might need an account manager to start to manage all of these accounts. You're not doing enough account management. You're our enterprise sales rep, and you're not spending enough time in our current accounts, right? So now we start to make sure that we're spreading our time across all parts of the funnel. The other thing I say is what we have a tendency to see is salespeople hang out at the bottom of the funnel. So they like the closing, they like doing the account management. That's typically where they're hanging out, and we don't see enough time and energy spent on prospecting. So they might have a few good months, and then things kind of dry up. Well, you might have you might have a lot of opportunities in the bottom of your funnel. Your bottom of your funnel might be at 400,000, 500,000. It's looking great. But then you close those opportunities. Well, you haven't been putting enough time to the top of the funnel during those months or during those weeks. Now we're hurting in 3 weeks. So this makes sure that we constantly have opportunities flowing through the pipeline. So just one way that you do this is you just add a type field. You just add a custom field to Salesforce called type, right? And you make it a dropdown. Is it prospecting? Is it account management? Is it selling? Is it issue management? So now we're able to track our completed tasks, how much of our time is spent across all those. So why do we do this? Well, for the one thing is we want to understand what's not working and what is working. Maybe our phone calls just aren't working. Maybe we need to retrain our salespeople, or maybe we need to change our scripts, right? Do we have the right resources, right? We might say, look, we're spending way too much time on issues, or we're not spending enough time on prospecting. Well, we now need to build out an SDR team, or we need to build out an account management team, right? Like our salespeople should not be handling these types of issues, and they should not be prospecting with very low type of accounts. Like I mentioned, you might close a lot this month, but you might not in 3 months because you weren't spending the right time prospecting. And then the one that I like is, are you doing the hard stuff? Are you making the cold calls? Are you having those difficult conversations to try to move an opportunity through the pipeline? And then my favorite one is, are we hanging out with the right accounts, right? So what I mean by that is, are we spending time with the accounts that will bring us opportunities? So we don't want to track activity just for the sake of tracking activity. I mean, I've been guilty of that, where I have a really busy day and I go home and I tell my wife, like, whew, that was a busy day. But then when I reflect on it, I think to myself, but I didn't get anything done. Like, I wasn't focused on the right types of activities. Well, I may have been calling a lot of C accounts. I may have been calling a lot of accounts who just never buy from us, but they like us, right? So then we say, well, let's create some touch reports, right? Like, let's create a program that keeps us connected and keeps us in touch with our accounts. So one thing I always recommend is classify your contacts and classify your accounts. Okay, so you might say, our A accounts bring us in, $200,000 in revenue a year. Therefore, we have to touch them one time a month. Our B accounts, we have to touch them once a quarter. Our C accounts, we have to touch them once every 6 months. Our D accounts once a year, and our accounts that we mark as X, we don't want to touch them, right? Like, they're just not good people, or they're not good accounts to go after. So we want to classify all of our accounts. Then we want to track, who are we supposed to touch this week? So of our A accounts, I have to touch 9 A accounts this week. I might give them a call. I might send them an email. I might, go visit them. I might take them some cookies, but I have to go touch those accounts. Well, how do they even show up on this report? Well, they show up on this report because I marked it as closed, or I'm sorry, I marked it as a completed task. So I might call Joe Smith over at Acme Corporation, that's an A account. I might call them on September 8th, and I complete that task. They won't show up on my report, on my touch report, until until October 8th of the next month, right? So now what happens is, now our sales manager isn't asking me, the salesperson, hey, have you touched this account lately? Right? Or, hey, when was the last time you've touched this account, or you contacted this account? Now they just go right into Salesforce. Oh, great, he's had these meetings, he dropped off cookies. I know that he's touching these accounts, right? So this is giving me kind of like, what's my call list? What's my touch list for the week? One thing that we recommend our clients to do is, we recommend them use Salesforce and create a lot of a lot of email templates, right? Create email templates that, if you have a lot of C accounts who you have to touch, or a lot of C contacts who you have to touch this week, go ahead and create an email template, run a quick report, or do what's called a list view in Salesforce, and, send this out to 20 people. Boom, there's your 20 touches. It's kind of a way of maybe not giving it the best attention, but it's a way to kind of make sure that we're still in front of our account. So we recommend these email templates all the time to accounts. Okay, so in closing, we have quota, 1.2 for the year, 100,000 for the month, pipeline, 3.6 in our full pipeline, 300 in our bottom stages, and then activity. What's the number of activity? What's the points, percentage by type, right? So now what we're getting towards is, now we're able to structure our Monday morning sales meeting to run 100% out of Salesforce. We don't have to spend time in the morning, Monday morning or Sunday night, scrambling to try to get all this stuff done. It's all within Salesforce. So I always recommend our clients, or anybody who I give this presentation to, always, your first goal is to always get rid of those spreadsheets and run your sales meeting 100% out of Salesforce. Okay. And lastly, if you're looking for some workbooks, if you're looking for some guidance to help you through this, we have 2 workbooks. One is the 7 Salesforce dashboards you need to grow and manage your sales pipeline. And then the second one is more of a checklist. It's going to walk you through the steps on how to set up these types of metrics for your company. And you could get those at bit.ly/7dashboards or bit.ly/ultimate-salesforce-checklist. So I'm really grateful that we got to spend this time together. Thank you very much for your time, Eve. It's been a real pleasure, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are some.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you also, Gary. That was really fascinating. I'm actually joined on my side by a couple of other people on my team, and actually my manager, Shelley, was really interested by the point idea, the idea of assigning point values to every task you complete. I think she's considering putting up a whiteboard behind her desk and
Good.
judging us throughout the week.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, no, it was all really interesting stuff. So in our last few minutes, I want to go over a couple questions we got, and if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to submit those. One that we had come in a little while ago was, how do you know when an opportunity is going to close? Is there any way to know from very high up in the funnel when an opportunity is going to close?
Yeah, so when it's high up in the funnel, it is kind of a best guess. So, if an opportunity calls you and they're high up in the funnel, you're trying to qualify them, you don't know exactly when they're going to close, but because you've been in the industry for a certain amount of time, you've heard things. It might be the tone of their voice, it might be some buying signals, but you're going to begin to pick up on things. And you just make a guess, like, you know what, this sounds like an opportunity that might close in 6 weeks. And then you put that in there. Then as you learn more about the opportunity is when you begin to update that close date more. So you might meet with them and you're like, oh, wow, it's not 6 weeks, it's actually 12 weeks. Well, you update that close date. And as it goes through the funnel, you just make sure that you keep that close date open. Or, I'm sorry, accurate.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Sorry, we're getting a couple of more questions coming in right now. One that we just got from Kim is, how do you measure the success of your events?
Okay, so I would assume these are like marketing events, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a few ways to do it. The simplest way is within Salesforce, you can create a campaign. And then that campaign, within that campaign would be all the event attendees, and then the accounts that they're with. And then if any of those event attendees have an opportunity created against it, then it's going to be tracked. So as it goes into the opportunity or into the funnel, then it's going to be tracked against that campaign. So that's one, right? So that's a real easy one using Salesforce functionality. But not everybody uses campaigns in Salesforce, right? It's, not all the marketing teams do it. So another idea would be just improving your lead source field a little bit. So maybe adding, let's say you do an event, maybe it's a webinar, right? Maybe it's a webinar and you just add that as a lead in Salesforce. And then every opportunity that you get from that webinar is tracked against that lead source. And then when those opportunities close, or if you lose them, you could then start to run metrics against that specific event.
Interesting. Thanks for the relevant example.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's see. We got another one coming in right now. Somebody was wondering if their company doesn't measure, success or quota or things like that in dollars, but rather in something else like units sold. And they don't really talk about quota because of that. How would they kind of utilize that quota chart that you showed us earlier?
Yeah, good. So we see that at times. Typically that's where the company is really driving to get units sold. It's a manufacturing company, things along those lines. Just switch everything to units. So instead of it being dollars, it's units. So if you have to sell 20 units a month, then your goal is going to be, make sure your pipeline has 60 units in the bottom of it, right? So you just convert everything to units.
Makes sense. So I think we have time for one last question that got in under the wire from Ingrid. And the question is, how do you track lead source when a lead comes in, comes from multiple sources within a short period of time? So maybe you met at a conference, plus they submitted a request through a third-party lead generation tool, plus came to their website. How do you track all of that?
Okay, so that's a great question. And that is one that I hate to give this answer because it's not going to give her, it's not really going to give her an answer. It's going to send her places to go. But typically it's done by the marketing software itself. So you would, if she's using some sort of, so if Ingrid, if you're using marketing software, you could set up that configuration within there. So so that's one way. And typically that would be done by giving a certain percentage to the different types of elements that they might come through. So like, website, they might open up an email, they might go to an event. And then ultimately what that does is that creates what's called a score. Now you could do it in Salesforce as well. You just have to get a little bit creative and really focused on making sure that we're bringing those activities within Salesforce, right? So if they go to an event, we better make sure, darn well sure, that we're tracking that event in Salesforce. We better make sure, there's a lot of tools out there that track who's on your website. We may want to bring that into Salesforce. There's a lot of email marketing tools that can track the open rates and who's clicking what, and we just integrate that with Salesforce. So now we're bringing that more into the contact record or into the opportunity record. It does take some configuration. It does take some work, but it's doable. And it's something that many marketing companies should do, so they don't give 100% of the credit to something that maybe, initiated the initial contact.
Right, because like you were saying earlier, it's really important that you know what sort of a lead source and eventual win came from, so you can see, which ones of them are most effective.
Yep.
And if you're giving all the credit to one, then that'll skew your numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And there's strategies out there for moving deals through the pipeline, right? Like you might run a campaign for a lot of opportunities that are just stuck in the pipeline. Well, that may have had great success, but no credit is given. So we have to make sure that we're tracking against all of it.
Right, makes a lot of sense. So I think that's all we're going to have time for today. I hope you all had half as much fun as I did. I know we got a couple more questions in there at the end. If you are interested in getting in touch with Gary, we've got his contact info right here, and we will be sending out the slides and the recording within 48 hours of the webinar. I want to thank our sponsor Conga again. I want to thank Gary for the fantastic presentation, and thanks to all of you for attending. I'm Eve Lyonsberg, and you can find Sales Pro Central on Twitter at Sales Pro Central and B2B Marketing Zone at B2B Marketing Z. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and have a great day.
Take care.